Raz, we're back.
Yeah.
The Generalists.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.
You must come. All right, we're back.
Come.
Yeah, you have to come.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're not allowed to not make it.
I chose to come.
Anyway, we're back. We got another episode. We got another fun guest, and we're gonna jump right in. Mustafa Rasheed. I think I know you from Yan. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Which probably a couple years ago we met for coffee. Mm-hmm. Stayed in touch, probably not as much as we should, but I think I'm one of your followers from the perspective of like your angel deals and some of the stuff that I picked your brain on about like Pakistan and the Bangladesh ecosystem, which we're going to jump into a little bit today. Mm-hmm. So you've been around for a while. You've worked at KPMG, ING, Enterprise Singapore. I think people know you from kind of your LinkedIn voice and all the things you're doing in the ecosystem. So we're going to dive into a lot of stuff around that and just see where this goes.
Let's do it.
Yeah. And thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So we're going to kick off our usual thing. We know you're born here, but then you moved. Mm-hmm. It took you a while. And then you're back.
Yeah.
Tell us.
It was a journey. I was born here. When I want to say like 1.5 or 2, my family moved over to Pakistan. Lived there for about 16 years. My family had business there. And, it's a beautiful country, but it's also a turbulent country. So it has its problems. So over the years, saw like a lot of governments change. Saw a military coup. Saw the government freeze US dollar accounts. All sorts of things like that. So in 2000, we left. We moved to the US. Lived there for a couple of years. I did high school there.
What city?
It's a town called Diamond Bar. On the border of LA and Orange County.
Okay.
A really nice community. Did high school there. Beautiful memories. Came back to Singapore when I was 19. Did national service. So I always knew I had to come back. My parents kept telling me, "Yeah, you're Singaporean. Don't forget the red book that you have.
There's a date of which you'll have to return."
yeah. And they start communicating with you when you're with your parents when you're about 12 or 13.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and if you live abroad, they're like, okay, you have to come back every year or so to renew your passport.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to put up a bond as well to get that exit permit. So,
interesting.
Yeah, so I got an extension until I finished high school. And I was trying to get one for university, but they're like, no, you're already 19. You need to come back now.
Yeah.
So came back 2003 and did national service for about 2.5 years. So that was fun. It was hard the first couple of years. You're like, like this, I was like this third culture kid getting thrown into the deep end of Singaporean culture, right? So you're in the army with people from all walks of life.
Yeah, and I think with not living there for so long, it's out of the frying pan into the fire, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
So crash course in Singlish, local food, all of that. It was hard at first, but I got good at it at the end.
And your parents stays in the US? You've been here alone?
So they moved to Singapore about a year after I did.
Okay.
Yeah. So for my mom, it was a full circle because she was born and raised here. My dad's from Pakistan. So my mom was like, everywhere we lived, she was like, there's no place like Singapore. There's no place like Singapore. We have to go back someday.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then since then, you've stayed?
Since then, we've stayed. It's been about 20 years now.
Got it. Yeah. That's a journey, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Miss stuff from America?
Yes, I do. So I miss...
Sorry, I have to ask. I have to ask.
Yes, we can.
Sore spot. I miss how car ownership is very easy there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of which it's not here.
It's not here. Plus, I take medication for epilepsy.
All right.
So it's a bit hard to get a driver's license here because of that.
Got it.
Whereas in the US, they're a bit more lenient on that.
Yeah, just get a doctor's note or something and you're good to go.
And as long as you're seizure-free for like a month or something, you can drive.
And more fun drives, let's be honest.
Yes. So I really miss Pacific Coast Highway and stuff like that.
I was going to say.
Beautiful.
Going north to south on the Pacific Coast Highway. I used to ride a motorcycle. Is fantastic.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Michael doesn't allow me to take a motorcycle.
I said in Singapore, no motorcycles in Singapore. I have a rule.
So I listen to Michael.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah, see?
And expensive.
Yeah.
So I really miss driving like in Los Angeles. Like we would drive out to Newport Beach, Manhattan Beach late at night and
just hang
out on the pier, drink coffee, eat donuts.
Yeah. And then drive around. Yeah, that's great. So Singapore, it's good that you're back from the perspective of like you've probably joined at an interesting time because you probably saw, if you're like me, the timing was almost no startup scene to suddenly a startup scene. So before we talk about, where I know from the Pakistani, like Bangladesh angle a little bit, because I think we could learn a lot from you on that. There's also just the whole like explosion of the Singapore startup scene. When did you enter that for yourself?
Somewhere around 2013. So when I started my career, I worked with my father and my uncle for a couple of years in commodity trading and real estate, and then joined the public sector with the SME Center, which is an arm of Enterprise Singapore. So I first started looking at, like trading companies, recruitment firms, IT companies, restaurants, stuff like that. Your hardcore small medium enterprises. Then I started to notice like the emergence of the startup ecosystem, right? You started seeing incubators and accelerators and stuff coming up. I think the first one I interacted with was JFDI.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a name you don't hear much anymore.
Yeah, Joyful. Oh yeah, you don't know this one. So I was involved in that too. So we'll do a little bit of history. There was actually just the reunion. You didn't make the reunion, right? Yeah. So there was a reunion. So it was literally, I would say, the first proper incubator accelerator started by Meng Wang and Hugh Mason. We should get them on sometime. Came off the backside kind of hackerspace, because I was actually hanging out at the hackerspace. It was one of the first things Meng did, and then JFDI came on that. It is Joyful Frog Digital Incubator from its official Singapore PTE name. And that is because it's actually, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Just fucking do it is what it actually stands for. But they couldn't use that as their official name, so they had to come up with this.
Makes sense.
And then they use a frog for the logo. So So nice. I think you can actually talk to a lot of people, correct me if I'm wrong, that if you say startups and you've been here, let's say a decade plus, it almost always invariably came from JFDI.
That was the OG. Like, they'd start with they'd have their networking nights on Fridays and stuff like that. And, people would gather there and you'd meet people and network and stuff. Yeah. It was really nice.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. Going back a ways. Yeah. And what did you, but what was your intersection of actually doing something with it? Was it investing, getting involved, advising, doing a startup? Like, tell us a little more, like, what was your role?
So part of my role with the SME Center was to work with small, medium enterprises and startups. So advising them on things like grants, tax incentives, fundraising, strategy, structure, productivity, internationalization, all the buzzwords you can think of, right, that the government would want businesses to look at. So after spending a couple of years looking at, hardcore SMEs, I developed this really strong interest in the startup space. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to go and reach out to incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, entrepreneur communities, and try and solve their problems and learn as much as I can because I enjoyed the space so much. So I started to then look at stuff like fundraising, look at pitch decks, look at how incubators and accelerators can improve, what kind of assistance can we get from the government to help this whole space. And I learned an incredible amount doing that. Yeah, I would meet about 25, 30 businesses every month.
Oh, wow.
And I did that for 8 years. So I often tell people that was the first MBA that I did because you learn so much sitting with business owners.
Yeah.
I tend to agree. It's even, you learn more.
Yeah. And what I noticed is that when you sit with a business owner and you know a little bit about their industry, let's say they're importing something from South America, and then you sit down with them, you say, hey, I heard that Brazil just raised their taxes on cashew nuts or whatever. And the business owner suddenly, their face lights up. They're like, yeah, this guy knows his shit, Yeah.
And since you were living in Pakistan, where did you start to kind of interface back into both Pakistan and Bangladesh as like getting involved with startups? Because that's what I think is something unique to your story as well.
A lot of that was organic when I started writing on LinkedIn. So about 2.5, I was always pretty active on LinkedIn, but about 2.5 years ago, I got really active. I started posting every day. I
remember when you did your post of, I'm going to post every day.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to do it, right?
The challenge. So they call it a challenge.
Yeah. And I started opening up my calendar, 20, 30 slots, sometimes every week. And I got a lot of inbound from Pakistan and Bangladesh. And I was like, okay, let me listen to all the problems and see where I can help, where I can give connections, where I can advise them. And that was really cool because I learned a lot doing that. And I started getting like a lot of requests to like founders would say, "Hey, Mustafa, would you?" I think today there was a post about advisory boards and stuff like that, right? So I was like, yeah, I'm happy to, and I got a lot of offers. So I was like, okay, from maybe out of 5, I'm going to choose like 1 or 2, right? Because a lot of founders give away equity like water, right? And then gives you a sensing as to how worth it is going to be in the long run. So yeah, that's how I slowly got involved in that space. Yeah. And then down the road, I kind of pivoted to like, after taking some advisory shares here and there, I started to feel a little bit like there's a part of the equation that's like not being satisfied because I wasn't earning cash, right? So I was like, okay, I need to pivot this to make it a monetary beneficial thing. So I pivoted to becoming a retainer-based advisory board member with startups. I did that for a little while. Some interesting learnings there too. So I realized that,
So rather than just taking the shares, it's hey, we're going to make this more contractual of like, I'm working for you with something I'm going to do, but you're going to pay me.
Yeah. A couple of things have to line up though. Like I find that if you're in a more expensive place and you're charging a less developed place, let's say.
A little bit impedance mismatch there.
It's a bit difficult, right? Because, they have to buy dollars then to pay you, which is because their currency is less stronger. And then the monetary system also has to support it because it's very hard to send dollars out of Pakistan and Bangladesh. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a bit of a challenge. Yeah. Had some good clients though. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that does create like another bar to jump over.
Yeah. It's a different ecosystem to different people, but I like your story.
Thank you.
Feeding startups, contributing to them, not always monetizing, but learning. This was your fee. I'm learning, I'm exposing, which is beautiful. Yeah. Because I thought you have like a kind of things in your mind, and after being, let's say, involved so much, what was the 1 or 2 things that were like surprising you, like living the startups?
So I realized that like people who work in the startup and innovation ecosystem, there's like 2 types of people. One is like people like us who are like ecosystem professionals. Either you're part of an incubator, accelerator, you run a program, you maybe build products for SMEs and startups, or you're a founder. And they don't necessarily switch between them. But once you're in the startup space, you tend not to leave. In some capacity, you'll be there. So that's one thing I learned. And even about myself, like over the years, I sat at different seats at the table. Government, bank, Big Four, and then advisor on my own, but never left the startup space. Yeah. So that's one thing I learned. The second thing I learned is that the startup ecosystem is actually a crossroad between like 4 different things, like innovation, business, government, and human behavior. So like innovation and business, you think, okay, no brainer, right? It's like innovation, business goes together, startup ecosystem. But government and human behavior. So in Singapore especially, I noticed that the government takes a lot of involvement in the startup and innovation space, right? Enterprise Singapore especially. And they really want businesses to succeed, and they want it to be like the place where businesses set up, they domicile, they create employment, and they use Singapore as a springboard into the region and the rest of the world. And human behavior, I feel like a lot of the startup ecosystem is, number one, making things easier for people, but also very much sentiment driven, right? So a lot of trends, a lot of like looking at how people think and changing the way people behave and do business and live their life. And a couple of big but also cliche examples are like, like Uber, like Google, like Microsoft even, stuff like that. It's changed the way we do stuff in our life. All came from startups.
There was a startup that you saw so many companies, different domains, I guess. There was a startup that you said there is no way they will succeed with what they had, and they actually did an amazing afterwards.
I can't think of one in particular, but I came across a lot of businesses over the last couple of years, and I think like, okay, some of the ones I come across, probably can't name any of them, but some of the ones I came across from Pakistan and Bangladesh, where I'm like, this one, that's a waste of time. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. And then next thing you know, boom, like did well. And I think, yeah, I guess, had I had the learnings at that time that I have now, I think I would not have been so quick to dismiss. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think even in those ecosystems, the kind of sheer tenacity to get one of them even going, given all the like financial rail problems and probably not enough talent, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's even harder there than here. I would imagine makes it maybe hard to pick the ones that might make it, because they go through so much even to just get to the gestation point that like, that's amazing in and of itself, given the headwinds, let alone becoming like big or successful. Right?
Absolutely. And if you think it's hard to fundraise in Singapore, try
there.
Try there. Try in your local ecosystem there, and from international investors when you're there, without a Singapore entity.
Yeah, and I think that's what, and we'll get to that in a later question, kind of like accelerating Asia and these other things and what they've seen. I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think that is about that situation, right? So you hit on when you talked about enterprise SME, and like you mentioned that you rattled off 4 different things people do. Not so much digging into those 4, but just the concept kind of fits our theology here, which is it's such a generalist thing you do, right?
Yeah.
And now, so I guess our question sometimes people, do you even think of it from that perspective that it is a generalism thing? And if you do, how has that had an effect on your kind of life and career, that notion of you've done so many different things. What's this thread? Well, we think this thread is generalism. So speak to that.
I think generalism has been a huge theme in my whole life, like growing up in different places. So growing up as this third culture kid, not always like fitting in a particular box, like not Pakistani enough, not American, not a born and raised Singaporean. So being a generalist is kind of being like a superpower, I would say. Like, I feel less lack from that, but more of a superpower. And I was talking to my partner about this a few days ago as well, and she was telling me that, and we're both half Singaporean, half Pakistani. So both Singaporean mothers, Pakistani fathers. And so we often talk about being half and half. And she read a book or a quote, and she shared with me that we're not half and half, we're actually both. We're both of those things. So I found that
so we're not dividing, we're actually
mix.
So
I found that really cool.
Yeah.
And in the career sense, started off in commodity trading, then moved to real estate, and then moved to the startup and innovation ecosystem. So like being a generalist in the sense of from the public sector, helping every single industry that I could, really learned a lot. And even though I did feel like I should be specializing in something, somewhere inside I felt like that would be a little bit boring, because I like having a lot of things going on at the same time. Somehow my brain doesn't feel quiet unless there's a lot of things going on. Like I get more work done when I sit at Starbucks with a lot of work going on. A lot of
noise and activity around you.
Yeah. And when I'm in my room and it's quiet, I just can't concentrate. So neurodiverse of some sort, I guess, right? So being a generalist in my career, then, Enterprise Singapore, ING, KPMG, learning all these different things along the way, and from government to banking to Big Four, and then doing stuff on my own. It's always been in the startup ecosystem, I would say, the last 10 years, but from a different perspective, right? Yeah, and I've just learned a lot of stuff along the way.
I always like to think about it. It's like you're in the wheelhouse of startups, but you've taken these different roles within that wheelhouse, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, when I read your stuff, it's just like it just kind of reeks of that generalism concept that I think of. That it's like, you're digging into these specialty buckets, but I think it's interesting that you say that you don't really want to go deep into one of them because you find that that's less challenging for you than going across, right?
Yeah. I couldn't. If I had to do one thing every single day, I think it would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
Did you get any comment, someone tell you, hey, you're a jack of all trades?
Yes. I say and I love it.
Yeah. But did you get any, you said I love it, and the other guy, he or she said, but you are the master of none.
Yeah. I get it. But I think if I had to be the master of one, I think that would drive me nuts. It just wouldn't be enough. Yeah. And monetary earning is one thing, but up here, it just wouldn't be enough.
Yeah, and I know that some people are like, they take that opposite side. They have to work at that function, and then that's where they excel, right? And those are like the specialists, I would say. But yeah, interesting.
I wonder if I could be a specialist generalist, right? Yeah.
I call that deep generalist. Like that's been my
it's like deep
tech, deep generalist.
Tech,
that's my.
It's a new gig.
Framing for that is like get really good at being a generalist.
Yeah.
Right? What does that mean?
Yeah, I could call myself a strategist.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah. Tell us more about. I hope I'm saying it right. Pyro Shop.
Yeah, Priyo Shop.
Priyo Shop.
Yeah.
So this is one of the big, high-profile things, big success in Bangladesh. Then there was a play to take some money from a VC over here in Singapore. And I want to stop there and say, what was the playbook? Why, Bangladesh taking money from VC in Singapore? Why not going to the US or any other place? So tell us about, this.
So great question. And so Priyo Shop has been really phenomenal. Like, I met the founder, I want to say like 3 years ago. And he's a really great guy, really humble, really smart. He's a really simple guy. And if you saw him in a crowd of like 1,000 people, you never guessed that he runs such a big startup. I invested in Priyo Shop, I want to say like 2022 or 2021. And since then, it's grown to become really, really big. It's a B2B marketplace for micro SMEs in Bangladesh. And what they do is, at the top end, they have like around 200 suppliers supplying FMCG, non-perishable items. And then underneath that, they have like, I want to say like almost 70,000 merchants buying through their marketplace. And I want to say they do something like north of 200 million in GMV today, which is insane.
For Bangladesh, it's massive.
It's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. And then they have they just signed a deal with Unilever, which is going to add a lot of money to their top line. And they have over 100 exclusive deals, like with Ajinomoto and companies like that, which is really amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. Why Singapore? I would say, okay, so looking at like South Asia, right? India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, a lot of these countries have, I want to say like banking and monetary policies that are not so startup friendly. They're catching up slowly, but nowhere near what Singapore has. So Singapore being a hub and wanting to be a hub of more and more things, it's created a banking system and business policy landscape where, I think we take for granted how high it ranks on the ease of doing business index, right? And that's what keeps attracting businesses over to Singapore. It's easy to set up a business here. It's easy to set up a fund here. It's easy to start fundraising from here and then use Singapore as a springboard to the region. Indian founders would look at Dubai, the UK, Delaware. Pakistani founders would look at Dubai first and then maybe Singapore after that. Bangladeshi founders would look at Singapore first.
Wow.
And that's what I noticed, yeah. So the moment the Bangladeshi startup starts growing, they'll look at domiciling.
But what flipped that into gear? Is it and we can kind of go deeper on this because I think it's an interesting thing, and maybe we'll get Craig on sometime and we can it's Askell, right? Maybe we can get him to show up sometime. Accelerating Asia figured this out too, right? Because they started going to Bangladesh, I think, to say, hey, we have a cohort open. And now you see, two or three Bangladeshi startups maybe per cohort? I don't know what the exact stat is. Craig, I'm sure you'll correct me. Is it, which thing begat the other? Is it that Bangladesh said, let's go to Singapore? Or is it because people started from the Singapore, you said, let's go there? Like, what ignited that flame?
I think it's actually started a long time ago. So Singapore and Bangladesh have had a lot of business over the years, commodity trade and stuff like that. And we also actually have a few 100,000 Bangladeshi workers in Singapore.
Yeah,
they're building our buildings and our streets and everything, right? So I think that affinity has always been there. And then when Singapore started to become a startup hub and Bangladesh started to catch up over the years, then there was always this very close access between Bangladesh and Singapore. You have direct flights and all of that. So I think that made it a lot easier. Whereas with Pakistan, we don't have that. There's no direct flights from Singapore to Pakistan.
Oh, that's right.
And
It's
there
cut
haven't
off,
been
right?
for more than a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is important, by the way. That the right
Yeah, I didn't
flight.
realize it was so easy. And I know that, like, when I talked to Craig about it, I know it's grown a lot in its desire and stuff like that. But what has that done for Priyo Shop to kind of have that capital and access and learning? I mean, what has that done for their journey? Because I know he'd be successful anyway, but has it helped them? And in what ways do you think?
Yeah, I think like having access to like coming to Singapore regularly has allowed him to pitch to investors here and show them that, hey, there's this whole new market that you may not have considered before. Because Singaporean investors typically look at Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam. They were looking at Myanmar until a few years ago. And then now it's like, okay, what's new, right? What's left? What's a new frontier market? I think that's where Bangladesh came in.
Yeah. And I guess he gets to kind of rub shoulders with the other people. Because I've seen him at the demo days and even when they come through, when they first started.
Yeah, and I hear
just-
that they have to try a little extra hard sometimes because it's a frontier market. Not too many people know about it. Plus, they're outside of ASEAN and outside of the Middle East.
Yeah.
And not really in the South Asian thing until recently, right? So they are part of South Asia, but they've kind of been under the radar for a long time.
Yeah.
So educating people about their economy is the first step.
Yeah. And it's pretty amazing, the growth of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of startups coming up there. There's I think there's 1 or 2 accelerators. There's a venture building studio.
Yeah.
The government
Turtle Ventures.
Yeah. I sit on their advisory board. Really interesting people. Yeah.
Yeah. She's ex-Microsoft, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. She was the country
Nice.
manager, I think, for Bangladesh.
Oh, she's full of energy and she's really
Yeah.
feisty. And she openly says she's like, I'm going to become the next prime minister of Bangladesh.
Wow.
I'm like, when you do, let me know. I'm going to catch the next flight. No,
I'll move back.
And it's a direct flight.
it's a direct flight. Yeah.
Yeah, the food's good too. So
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting. I know a lot about Bangladesh. I read a lot about it, and I interact with a lot of founders. And I've actually never been.
You haven't been yet?
Never.
Yeah.
I get invited a lot, and there's this conference that happens every year. And
Yes,
get
I
an
got
invitation.
invited and I couldn't make it last time. It's the big one, right? Because the government's involved and everything.
Yeah.
It's the whole like digital Bangladesh or something. It's a huge conference.
Are you going this year?
No, but one of these days it's not in. I used to help cover it when AWS and then they rearranged all these things. It's not in my patch.
But it's mainly e-commerce, no?
All sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, dude, a lot
The
of
whole
fintech
ecosystem.
innovation too,
Yeah,
because there's a
fintech.
lot of payment problem. It's kind of like if you were to like go to Singapore 15 years ago too. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe Singapore is more modern without its rails, but I look at it like any kind of emerging ecosystem where the startups are now just getting going.
Yeah.
It's everything. It's logistics. It's
Everything.
payments. It's identity things. It's a whole bunch of things. And of course, even all the interactions, like you said, because there's not only a lot of Bangladeshi workers here, they're in Dubai, they're never, so you have all the kind of overseas Bangladeshi services.
And there's a whole segment catering to that. in the
Yeah,
whole
that's what I mean,
startup
like
space.
startups that are catering
Yeah.
just to that,
Yeah.
right? Because they have a money flow problem and paying their bills back and things like that. It's
Yeah.
super interesting.
But I'm still thinking, we speaking about, startups and how Singapore enable with Enterprise Singapore and the banks. And, but still, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm not familiar. There is no the SVB bank over here. Yeah, there is no bank like Silicon Valley Bank in the good way. I'm not talking about their incident.
Yeah.
Understanding why the support of a startup is a different of support of a business. It's a different structure of how they're gonna get the money, what's gonna be in the account. Is there, like, based on your experience?
I think like if we look at businesses like Aspire, Wise, and stuff like that, I think they're trying to do stuff like that. I think you'll less see a DBS or a UOB or something doing something like that. I think they're still very strong in their. I can't paint compliance in a negative light because it's a good thing, but it's just that they're very, very black and white, right? Where it comes to like, okay, I mean, I can't say the startups are not black and white. Of course, they are, the fintech ones. But I guess they're a bit more flexible and open to startups, which is why you see a lot more startups setting up with these guys instead of like traditional banks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the money, the way the money come into the bank account is different.
Yes.
I believe SVB has a lot of customers here, actually.
Yeah? Really?
Yeah, with the funds and stuff like that. Same with
It's a different playbook.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's a different playbook of how to run an account. And I'm
Yeah.
saying it as an Israeli, lots of Israelis like the SVB bank because of that and other banks. And Also,
Are they in Israel as well? SBB?
And traditional banks in Israel, they actually develop in the past 7 years departments that kind of mimic the same playbook that SBB Bank had. So they know it's a different mindset in terms of the people that managing the accounts in the bank.
Yeah, because the needs are different, right? The way you draw down the money is different. You may need to get the money in your holding company and send it offshore to another country where it's being used for operational stuff. And then your fundraising goes into this stuff, your structuring and everything. It's a whole different animal.
Exactly. And you cannot say, hey, your credit score is like that. No, man, it's like, it's totally different.
Yeah, I don't need project financing. I don't need LCs. I don't need any of that. It's different.
That's the reason I'm saying, and this is part of, I wonder if here there is, something like that.
I don't think there's enough of it.
No.
Yeah. It's a different system.
No, I don't think there's enough of it. And I think the barrier needs to keep lowering to use those kind of services.
Yeah.
So I follow you on LinkedIn, and I love some of your how-to posts, so I call them, or your learnings from things.
Thank you.
So this question is more from that fun kind of angle. So I'm sure all the time you're getting these, do you want to be an advisor? Do you want to be on our board? Do you want to invest? You probably get more of it even than I do. So what's a simple, common mistake or thing that, let me just say it plain, bugs you when you see some of these fundraising decks that you would fix that maybe people could learn from?
Sometimes I see decks that are really overloaded. So you'll see a pitch deck which has 35 slides or something, and I'm like, dude, you don't need more than 15 maybe?
Yeah.
So I heard of this thing called the 10-20-30 rule. You guys might have heard of that. It says not more than 10 slides, not more than 20 minutes to present, and font size no smaller than 30. I think you can go up to 15 slides is fine, I think. But you shouldn't take too long to present it, 15 minutes, 20 minutes maximum. And your fonts should be big. And that works for two things. You can read it easily, and you won't write too much because the font is big.
Yeah, sucks up some of the space.
I see a lot of founders writing whole sentences, putting paragraphs, and I'm like, nobody's going to read that.
Nobody.
You want bullet points, and you want people to be looking at you while you're expressing it. You don't want people to be reading the slides when you're presenting, especially when you're pitching on stage. And even if you're sending your deck to an investor in an email, it's a hook to get you the meeting.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a
almost the same rules should apply.
Yeah. It's not a PDF report that you're sending to somebody.
Yeah. What's your teaser deck size? Under 15? Always?
It's 5.
Huh?
It's 5. And I call it the trailer deck.
Fantastic.
It's 5, and afterward it's 13, 15. And it's more conversation, but I'm not on stage. It's more conversation, like we did this morning.
Yeah.
So, but does it make sense? Do you have any question? What do you think about it? Because you want to sense, the other side.
Yeah.
So
I got to watch Raz pitch a VC today, so it was fun.
Nice. Fantastic. And if you can make a video, that's even better, like a 1 or 2 minute video. That really brings it to life. I tell founders, make a video, send it together.
Oh, and send the video.
Love it.
Yeah. I always tell people, send us attachments, stop with this DocSend stuff, make it simple for people.
Yeah, because nobody wants, when I look at
no one wants a third step, right?
Yeah, and I don't want the founder to know how many times I've looked at the deck, because then they're going to follow up more with me.
Yeah.
So
it's up to me, right?
Yeah. Also, I think it's about the story. It's something I learned in the past 2 years. It's like how you tell the story. So video, I love it. Because it's kind of a story. The moment you see, video, it's become a story.
Yeah, your passion comes out in that.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I think it's good to learn from you on these ecosystem things, because I never thought about how deep the Bangladesh stuff goes. But it sounds like you're due for a trip one of these days. So,
I am. Yeah.
You'll need to get there.
You build the corridor. Now you need to use it.
You should go to that conference.
I'm working on it because, so for a little bit off topic, but about 10, 15 years ago, I got really uncomfortable flying, right? And then that was really, really hard because I traveled a lot when I was younger. As a teenager, as a young adult, I flew a lot, between America and Singapore and even to the UK even. And that was way before they had screens. So I can't picture that now, like how I did that. But over the last 2 years, I started to get help for that. Started getting therapy. started really pushing my boundaries and trying to break that, right? So fear of heights and flying. So started taking short flights. I'm going to start pushing that boundary a bit more now.
Yeah.
Nice.
And hopefully Bangladesh very soon.
How long's the flight to Bangladesh?
About 4 or 5 hours.
All right, you'll get there.
Yeah, it's very short. Yeah.
You'll get there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
It's funny you mentioned, I saw this today in the news somewhere and I was just completely baffled by it. You mentioned you used to fly, and I remember too, like, there were no screens,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't have phones.
There was the one screen in the front.
Yeah, it would come down and you're straining to watch, and there was no Wi-Fi, and like, that was just normal. So there's this whole thing going on right now, and excuse the language, they call it raw dogging, where these teenagers and influencers are posting how they survive long flights without using the screen, without touching their laptop. I'm like, who cares? I'm like, I go, the best thing for me is to be able to watch a movie with a glass of wine on a flight.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm like, it's like,
Yeah.
it's so like, it's a great time. So I was just like, who cares? Like, why would you not want to touch your device?
It's like a time capsule.
Yeah, it's
You know,
fun.
You can use it for a time capsule. Like,
I'm always know when I alarm flight coming. I mean, I know you'll work up to it, that I'm kind of like, it's a lot of downtime where I
Yeah.
can just, because I actually don't use the Wi-Fi. I just want to sit there and watch as many movies as I can.
Disconnect,
and
huh?
get a little nap in maybe.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fun. So thanks for coming. So we're going to move into our closers, as we call them. And we do these to everybody. So you're not special in that regard, but hopefully
You are special.
You are
but-
special, but in the we're going to ask you, you're not going to get out of these. That's what I mean by not being special.
I know,
But
I
think
had to trigger you.
it's great learning from you all this stuff, though. So, and thanks for coming. So let's move
Thank
over
you.
to these.
Yeah, so if you go back to your 20 years old, what would you tell him?
I'm 40 now, so like 20 years ago I would have been 20. So I was in the army. I guess I would tell myself, don't be afraid of things, and like don't ever let like fear predict or form your path ahead. The moment you stop doing things out of fear is when you lose, right? So you just have to keep pushing, keep going. And this is what I've learned now as a 40-year-old, that there were things that scared me that I stopped doing, like I stopped flying and stuff like that because they scared me. But had I not stopped, I would have broken through that fear a lot easier. Yeah. So I would tell myself, don't stop doing anything that scares you. Do it afraid.
Yeah.
It's still
Just do
better.
it.
Yeah.
But it's scare because of failing or scare because of other... Sorry for...
Yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah, I think when we stop doing things out of fear, we're scared that we won't be able to go through with it, or we'll do it and be really afraid. We're gonna, you're gonna sweat. You're gonna have a nervous breakdown. You're gonna cry. You're gonna maybe it comes back to like feeling embarrassed or feeling something eventually. But yeah, so I guess that's one thing. Another thing I would tell myself is do more business experiments. Start early. I've done a lot of experiments in the last 10 years, but I wish I'd started when I was 20 years old.
That'd be like entrepreneurial things. Like,
Yeah.
Just try things.
Yeah, like I would have, I wish I'd started back then, setting up websites, setting up, social media, e-commerce or whatever, all sorts of things over the years. I would have learned a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Another thing I would tell myself is buy stocks. Bitcoin.
We all do that. Invest in an index fund.
NVIDIA.
I swear, Nvidia,
He's like
Bitcoin,
index
Apple,
NVIDIA.
Yeah.
all of that. Yeah.
That would have been a superpower. So
Yeah.
what do you do to stay healthy, both physical and mental? Like, kind of what have you learned about yourself there that makes a difference in your life?
Yeah, I like running a couple of times a week. So thankfully, the place where I live, there's a gym like right under where I stay. So a couple of times a week, I'll run on the treadmill, listen to music, get a good sweat. It helps clear my mind, and I get good sleep from that too. Yeah, and I'm terrible with sleep. I can sleep 4 or 5 hours and be absolutely fine most of the time. But I know it's bad for me in the long run.
So you got to get more sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I drink a lot of tea.
That might be helping with the not sleep.
Yeah, so I'm not a coffee drinker. I seldom drink coffee,
Yeah.
but I drink about maybe 4 cups of tea in a day, sometimes 5. And yeah.
Yeah, I can't do the tea thing, and I'm trying to cut back on my coffee.
Yeah.
I'm down to like 2 cups in the morning. That's it. So
And when it comes to like mental wellness, I would say seeing a therapist actually changed the way I thought about a lot of things. And I know most people do that kind of stuff. Most people see a therapist as a corrective way, right? But I would encourage everybody to
you
like,
saw it as just. You did this when you were older? Like, what age did you?
I mean, the first time I saw a therapist was maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, and I went for a couple of sessions, and I was like,
Why am I doing
this?
this?
It's a waste of my time.
Yeah.
But then 2 years ago, I started going again because I was like, okay, there's a couple of things I really want to work on, but I can live with it if I don't fix those. But this is something I just feel like I need to become a better version of myself. I know it sounds a little cliche, but and once I started going regularly, I was like, shit, I feel like there's a whole weight off my shoulders.
Yeah.
And people often wonder that once they go for therapy, are they still going to be the same person on the other side of it? But you're actually more yourself on the other side of it.
Because you learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people are like, I mean, thanks for bringing that up. I think people would be afraid to say it or discuss it, but I think it's no different, I think, a little bit when I decided to learn this coaching thing, which, full disclosure, I don't even know if I'm going to do it, but the process of learning about it, as everybody says, it's like you're your own first, was incredibly enlightening. And if anything, it just put this mirror on, like, I have so many things to fix prior to maybe being a coach that I need to work on those things first. But that was the enlightenment phase of just, and I think it's just the working on yourself, right? A lot of times I don't think we give ourselves time to do it.
No, we're
and
so busy running.
Yeah, and I think the therapy thing is like a direct, actionable thing of giving yourself the time to work on yourself because you have to go talk to them, right?
And it will, some days it'll be easy, some days it'll be hard, some days you'll cry.
Yeah.
It's all part of it.
But it's good.
And I can say that I didn't do therapist, but I did like kind of coaching, mentoring, coaching, more coaching. And it's also a therapy.
Yeah.
You don't call it a therapy. It's a therapy.
Yeah.
It is therapy.
Yeah. Because it's like I was talking to a mirror. So I understand completely the what you are referring to, and I'm saying to other people that listen to us is that in your mind doesn't have to be a shape of a therapy with a couch with it can be different shapes of, even go to a coach or she or he or whatever. It's kind of a therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this kind of strength and vulnerability versus, if I can call the opposite of that, some kind of pride or something, right? There's this strength in like being able to say, I have a problem with this, or I find this difficult, or I need a different perspective on this.
There's a lot of power in being able to admit it.
Actually, I look for this culture. I said I want someone that tell me that I'm doing maybe something wrong. Interesting.
It's awesome.
Last thing. Did you read something, watch something, listen to something that you want to share recently?
I think in the theme of being a generalist, I'm a huge nerd. Like, so no one particular like series or podcast or book or author or anything like that. I'm a huge nerd. Like, my idea of a nice afternoon of me time is sitting in a cafe, watching a video on my phone about like how to write better sales email offers, how to be a better, whatever, about business generally. So I love doing stuff like that. It feeds my brain. So in just this 1 year, like, I've learned about psychology of sales. I've learned about corporate directorships. I've learned about AI, still learning about that. So very, very diverse in learnings. And I feel like, sometimes I feel like the brain needs to eat a lot.
Hungry.
Is this all YouTube mostly?
YouTube, Udemy, sometimes Spotify.
Okay.
TikTok? I'm just joking.
TikTok too.
That's good stuff once in a while.
TikTok and YouTube Shorts are the first layer, right? So anytime you need to learn something super quickly, like, let's say I hear a new term, right? Like I hear, just for example, what's a hedge fund, what's a safe note or whatever. I'll go and find the shortest video I can find, and that's like the layer one. Then I'm like, okay, I want to learn more. Then I find the bigger one.
Awesome. Thanks, Mustafa. This is great. And thanks for enlightening us on a lot of stuff. And we appreciate having you on.
Thank you so much, guys. Lovely to be here and great to talk to you guys.
I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you
for coming.
Thanks.